By now, everyone's heard the story. Andrade has been fired from WWE. But it got a little bit more interesting as we see that there were many things afoot in the firing of Andrade, and this was probably a long time coming. I want to say, for starters, I am a fan. I know that he's not everybody's cup of tea, but I am an Andrade guy. I'm a supporter. Hopefully he goes somewhere where I'll actually watch him, but we'll talk more about that later. It was announced on September the 13th, which was a Saturday, that Andrade had been fired from WWE. There was a lot of confusion why initially. Then there were a bevy of stories that came out. One of the first ones that there was a creative frustration from Andrade stemming from his initial return in 2024. He wasn't used very well, and he wasn't used often at all, to be quite honest. Then, after, he started getting back on track, the tag team with Phoenix, they were actually planned to win the tag team championships at Clash in Paris. But at this time, Andrade kind of disappeared. He ghosted WWE. Nobody knows where he went. Well, it didn't take long before people started really discussing this. And Dave Meltzer says that, well, it wasn't drug related, it wasn't alcohol related, and it wasn't related to Charlotte, but he was sent home from a TV taping in about mid-August. And we're like, what the hell was that all about? And then it comes out shortly thereafter, I think John Alba at Sports Illustrated says that, well, he did fail a wellness test, was suspended for 30 days, which would explain one of his disappearances. And then he was sent home shortly thereafter after some sort of unknown backstage incident. And then there was some ancillary situations. Lucha Blog discussed several weeks ago, actually months ago, back when WWE announced that they had bought AAA, and, they had the talent being treated like hood ornaments, standing next to the former owners of AAA, and Andrade was behind them rolling his eyes and looking very uncomfortable, that AAA, they owed Andrade some money for a Triple Mania show that he worked and he never got paid for. Well, this comes up again because Dave Meltzer claims that Andrade was offered a spot on one of these AAA shows and he refused to do it. Time of recording, Andrade hasn't put his side out yet, so we don't know what's the time frame on any of these things. But it stands to reason that Andrade was just being ungovernable, which is literally the gimmick. He's being difficult. He's been uncooperative. He was supposed to win a tag team championship, but got sent home because he complained, but we don't know what that was about, and we also don't know what this wellness violation was about, or what was he supposed to do at this AAA show, and why does it matter, considering WWE now owns AAA, and not the previous owners, and he will be working for WWE, which he already worked for, and not working for the previous owners, so why would he continue to have beef with AAA? I don't know, but all of these things are floating around, and there was just some ideas that popped into my head about this whole thing. Of course, number one, the wellness violation. There's a lot of discussion about Andrade being on steroids. I can believe it. I can believe that he's on the gear. I do believe that there are people who are getting away with him being on steroids, but I will give this caveat. John Alba says that sometimes a guy will be suspended if they fail to produce a drug test. So it's entirely possible that Andrade didn't fail a drug test, but that he simply did not produce a drug test when WWE asked him for one. So it's not entirely that he failed. It could also be that he refused to take one, or that he took one and didn't turn it in time, or something like that. Which would also explain if he had some kind of backstage altercation that led to him being sent home. Now, of course, we know he's not the only one that's on the gas. Now, to be quite honest, we should also take into account that it could be other things. Just because most wellness violations are about steroids doesn't necessarily mean it's steroids. So I will say that. One of the things that I did that kind of rang in my ears when it came to Andrade sort of being frustrated is I don't think anybody ever asked this question, but does anybody know what he thinks about that divorce? You know, he divorced Charlotte and everybody felt bad for her, and there was interviews with her talking about it and how terrible it was for her. Nobody ever asked how he felt about being divorced and having to work on the same show as Charlotte. That had to be difficult. You know, it had to be difficult. I'm not saying she did something or that she was responsible for his firing. Only that it's an awkward situation to be forced to work with your ex-wife. And we don't know what kind of terms that they were on when they separated. I can't say I would be thrilled to have my big return to WWE and have to work on the same show as my ex-wife, which, I mean, he had to know that that was going to be an option. But furthermore, emotionally, we don't know how he reacts to people dumping all this sympathy out on Charlotte for their divorce. We don't know what happened between them. So it has to be an emotionally tough thing for him as well. I also find it odd that Andrade and Phoenix were scheduled to win the tag team championships at Clash in Paris, and he decided to no-show that event, basically saying, well, that's not important, don't care about that. Now, there was indeed some evidence that he was supposed to be in Paris because one of the fans who went to the event actually had some paraphernalia, some merchandise that had both him and Phoenix on it. So clearly the card was changed so that, you know, to reflect that he wasn't going to be on the show. There's a whole lot of speculation. And, you know, Meltzer's speculation was sort of half right when Meltzer said it wasn't drug or alcohol or Charlotte related. Well, it was related to something drug related if he got suspended for 30 days without pay, and that pretty much pissed him off. It got something to do with drugs, you know, and it's got something to do with creative as well. I mean, months and months happened where he didn't do anything, and he was working with Carmelo Hayes and LA Knight and was not moving up the card at all. Clearly, all in all, this run was a complete waste of time. Andrade's 35 years old. He's incredibly talented, charismatic. He looks great. The idea that this guy had no place on the roster where, you know, certain other talents do, we get it. English isn't his best language. You could easily put somebody with him to make that thing work out. But it feels like WWE brought him back for no other reason than, hey, he was a black and gold NXT guy, and remember that? That was great. That was cool. And that there was no other plan for him outside of, man, we're going to throw him in the mid-card, and he's going to have some mid-card matches. But Andrade's the kind of guy that if he's frustrated or if he's not unhappy, he takes to social media. And there has been times during this run that he went to social media basically doing the Sonic the Hedgehog foot tap. Like, hey, you know, I'm here. What are you doing? And maybe people got tired of that. It's entirely, they just got tired of each other. You know, sometimes these things happen. Andrade is an incredibly talented guy. Let's talk about what's next for him. I think that it's far more likely that he's going to end up in CMLL. I think the second most likely thing is a run in New Japan. New Japan is primed for a guy like him right now because they got nothing over there. They're pretty much dead in the water. He could go to Japan and probably clean up, especially be a main event guy in Japan at this point with all the WWE and AEW exposure he's had. Of course, there's been a lot of conversation about a return to AEW. Well, we don't know what kind of bridge he may or may not have burned when he left AEW the first time. There was a whole lot of conversation about him being uncooperative there as well. Of course, him punching out Sammy Guevara or slapping him or however that happened. So this guy's got a bad reputation. Tony Khan's very sensitive. I'm not sure that Andrade is the kind of guy he would really want to take back after all the stuff that happened the first time, and now knowing that he kind of got chased out of WWE again. It might be better for Tony Khan to use him on a temporary basis. So if he goes to New Japan or CMLL, you could always just bring him in for shots here and there and not have to worry about keeping him busy on a more permanent basis. You know what I'm saying? But as a guy who is a fan of his, I hope he doesn't end up in the doldrums of the indies. I hope he doesn't end up, working Mexican indies and, looking real crazy and washed out. He has the ability to be a top guy somewhere. Maybe not in WWE due to his very limited English. Maybe not in AEW because they don't take Hispanics seriously in AEW, nor are they trying to do anything in terms of elevating people. Most of the talent is in the same spot they've been in for years. I mean, there's very few guys that are moving up. And the same thing can be said for WWE right now, where Triple H is obsessed with the guys he's obsessed with, and there's no motion being made on moving other people up. Running New Japan could really help him because, again, New Japan is pretty much a graveyard. I would imagine the worst possible option would be him ending up in a place like MLW, working with people like Matt Riddle, which, it's fine, it pays, but I certainly think he could do better than that. But at the same time, with his reputation, maybe he can't. When you think about the guy being unhappy the first time in WWE and basically wanting out and leaving under weird auspices the first time he left WWE because he didn't like doing a bunch of jobs and he was unhappy. Then he goes to AEW. They didn't really know what to do with him. He was frustrated there. He's beating up people in the back. Again, he's a reckless tweeter. They end up letting him out of that contract. He comes back to WWE to almost no fanfare. And WWE tries their best. Well, they don't. They don't try their best to get him over. But they did get a vehicle that works, which is his tag team with Phoenix. But then he screws that up because, well, he don't have his chair don't have all four legs. And that seems to be the issue with Andrade, is that he seems to be temperamental and the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top. So it's an interesting situation how he is a quintessential pro wrestler that, maybe he's just not meant to be at the highest levels. Maybe he's just not meant to be where people like me might want him to be. He might be, one of these guys like Bruiser Brody or Teddy Hart, who's a much better used, floating around, never getting too comfortable anywhere, and being an independent contractor, which is what a lot of wrestlers want to be. Maybe that's the best option for him. But I'll keep my eye open. Again, I'm a fan. But this thing about him getting fired and him disappearing, that's interesting. I hope he's okay. There's a whole lot of silence about where he is, and he had no response. Usually he's not an active tweeter, but you would imagine he would have something to say by now as all of these stories are flooding out. And it is seeming like WWE is kind of burying him by, talking about the wellness stuff and him no-showing events, and that seems to be WWE muddying the waters a little bit. So I'm interested in seeing his side of the story. But as of right now, it's probably for the best that he leaves. He wasn't being used properly. There's no space for him to move up. The guy is a star and he thinks he's a star. You don't need to deal with this shit. A year of this is enough, And I think him breaking out, it should shine a light on how shitty a job WWE is doing when it comes to reintegrating people who left back onto the roster. But I'm a fan of Andrade, and I'm willing to take the slings and the arrows of people who don't like him. Anyway, talk to you guys later.
Yeah. We're just gonna